are here to talk about why equal representation in popular culture matters. And we've just heard a wonderful example of how popular culture, music in particular, can both change the energy and also share a really important message. So we're going to jump right in. Claire, with you. So we've heard earlier about the importance of changing the narrative. So tell us what you have learned about the power of storytelling to challenge and change gender norms.
Well, I'm going to talk about the power of storytelling and the way it works, the different levels it works at, and it's a sort of playbook. And we've heard that other people are using the playbook for bad, and the point is we should all be using it for good. And there's really 3 levels at which storytelling works. The first one is just awareness. It's just telling you something is happening. And it could be, me, another latchkey kid from the 80s, watching Who's the Boss on television and going, oh, look, she's the boss. And also shoulder pads, yay. Or it could be MTV Sugar doing a show in a lot of countries in Africa about just awareness of sexually transmitted diseases and how you catch them and how you don't catch them. And that's the very basic level at which storytelling works, because it tells you about stuff without preaching to you. And you retain information in a very different way when you're not getting preached at, as it turns out. But the second level, the really deeper level at which storytelling works when it's done well, is that it completely counters this problem that we're all encountering, which is the othering. Is this sense that this is somebody that has such a different experience and I just cannot understand it and therefore I don't like it. TV creates empathy and it creates emotional connections with people that don't look like you, that don't feel like you, that maybe don't love like you. And that is something that is the deepest, the strongest strength of storytelling. And I always think of this example, this is an American example, but Tom Hanks played an AIDS patient in a film called Philadelphia. This is a really long time ago. And this is Tom Hanks, guys. This is the perfect son-in-law of America. And people were like, oh, okay, so maybe I can discuss with people who have AIDS, and maybe they are like me, and they're just normal kids, normal guys going through something. And that's the power of storytelling, is that it is allowing you to create a real deep emotional connection with people who maybe aren't going through the same things as you. At its strongest point, storytelling can change or certainly reflect the changes in social norms. And we've seen this with a lot of examples. It's now unacceptable to show a TV show where people don't put their seatbelts on, But it wasn't always the case. Look at any old movie. It's now, you wouldn't see James Bond walk into his car after he's had 3 martinis anymore. That's just not acceptable. Doesn't mean drink driving has disappeared. It's still there. But the social norm around drink driving has completely disappeared. Domestic abuse is a great example of social norms being reflected at you from the television. It's not acceptable anymore to show a man slapping his wife because his dinner's not on the table in most countries. But again, doesn't mean the behavior has disappeared, but it means there's a lot more shame in it because the social norm has changed. I'm finished there, but one of my favorite examples of how the TV both reflects and amplifies social norm change was the Black President 24, if you remember that show. 24 was a deeply conservative TV show on a deeply conservative network who presented an upstanding black president in, I think, the early years 2000. And lo and behold, 5 years later, Barack Obama was elected. Now, was it directly correlated? No, obviously. But it did present to the nation it did reinforce to the nation the fact that actually it was fine to have a black president. And that's the power of storytelling.
So it can make different realities more plausible, more approachable? Yeah. It's a lot, yes, exactly. More approachable and more connected. Okay, Caty, I'm going to turn to you. So you come to us, I am facing you, you come to us from the world of entertainment media. And so I read an interesting statistic recently coming out of the San Diego State University's Center for the Study of Women in Film and Television. And they found that on projects with at least one female creator, that they tended to hire more women generally. So I wonder if you can talk to us about some of the behind-the-scenes roles that really benefit from increased representation of women. So from content creation to production to marketing.
Certainly. So my background is I worked as a marketer at a US-based network called the CW. We basically had shows that then ended up going internationally, and we were sort of the superhero shows and horny teenagers. So Riverdale, Gossip Girl, Vampire Diaries, just horny,
all the best shows.
horny species in general. And so we were kind of accidentally groundbreaking in many ways when sort of we started to take a look at ourselves as a network and doing some statistics. We had more female creators and showrunners than not. And that was something that just doesn't happen. We, for many years, led all the other networks in representations of gay and lesbian and transgender and et cetera, characters. And so the things that help that happen are the showrunners, right? The people who create the shows are setting the tone. So they're not just hiring other writers or other producers, they're also in the meetings of like who's going to be hired for hair and makeup or who's going to be hired for as a dolly grip. They probably would not be talking to the dolly grip, someone else. But what's great there is that so many women were in these positions, they were able to hire other women. However, you know, we also know that we ran smack dab into intersectionality, right? So Julie Plec was one of the women who ran the show Vampire Diaries, super talented writer, and what she didn't know until it was brought to her attention was that she needed to hire different makeup artists, hair and makeup artists, for black cast members than for the white cast members, because that wasn't something that had been an issue before on any show that she did or any show that the other producers had done. But since they had the representation and they had one of the sort of second leads was a black woman, they realized they needed to be hiring people who knew how to do her hair and her makeup in a way. And, you know, it all comes down to the network, those of us who were working on marketing the shows or the executives who were developing shows. There were a lot of women involved in those decisions. When the network was founded, it was run by a woman. And so when a lot of the women who worked there gave a leg up to a lot of other women who worked there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe it's obvious, but what did you notice then about what showed up on screen?
So on screen, you know, what showed up on screen was like some really tender, sweet stories and some really challenges to social norms sort of couched in big, broad entertainment, right? So you wouldn't necessarily think a show about a superhero is going to teach you something about life or about how we believe that, you know, civilization should work, right? But, you know, so on Supergirl, for example, you know, we had the first trans superhero played by a trans person on the show. And so just sort of a lot of the things that got brought into the shows just in the course of doing business were able to just sort of bring that, bring someone new into people's living rooms under the, you know, like it's the spoonful of sugar that made the medicine go down, right? You know, there's a great organization in the United States called See Her, and it's a consortium of advertisers and a lot of other people, and their slogan is, if you can see her, you can be her. And the CW did a lot of work with them in terms of making sure that we were not just sort of living a world in which women were making the decisions, but we were showing that women were making decisions on what we were doing.
And this is a great segue, actually, to my question for you, Maria. So too often, people don't see themselves in the stories we tell. So I wonder, from your perspective, what's the importance of diverse and dynamic content and storytelling?
So research shows that if you know someone who's LGBTQ, you are more likely to, you'll be more tolerant and more respectful. And of course, we know, looking around the world, that is, not everyone knows someone. But through popular media, through, you know, we bring people into our living rooms. They become our friends. You know, they become, in some ways, our chosen family even. The people that we see. And so, and now, of course, it's on your phones, it's right in your hand. So having that diversity is incredibly critical. And I mean, I want to come back to this idea that representation matters, because sometimes, you know, if I go back 20, 30 years, there was like, you know, you'd have a series and there would be like one character who was, you know, it was drama or something. So they weren't perfect. And you were like, oh, no, don't show that. And I think that having that diversity is really so critical. It's like we are all people all women, all people in all of our diversity. We have to be represented, and there can't just be like one or two of us, because that is not enough. Like there is not one way to be anything really. And so to have a diverse representation, I think, is really critical. And coming back to what you just said about, yeah, if you can see it, you can be it. And that goes for being the boss, but it also goes for being a non-binary person or anything else. So I think that is incredibly important. And what I see as part of the ongoing backlash in many places is that governments that do not want LGBTIQ people to have human rights also see this, and so they ban certain characters from being displayed in popular media. So I think you need both ways. Like you need to push it forward, and of course we need to get governments to agree that diversity is fundamentally a good thing, and we need that freedom of expression, and we need to be able to be visible in all media, really.
If I can just pick up on this, because I think it's so important. The banning of books, the banning of certain, especially for children, and we heard about young children earlier, it goes back to that awareness. You need to know that it's possible. It doesn't matter then. It's your personal choice, but it needs to be featured, and I think that's definitely something we need to continue to fight against.
Katja, hello. I want to zoom out just a little bit and talk about popular culture broadly. And so I really like the metaphor of wind for culture. So it's invisible, but we can feel it, and we certainly can see the impact. And so when it's a headwind, it's really hard to make progress. But if we can harness it, it's this tremendous source of energy. So tell us about the power of popular culture to shift beliefs, behaviors, norms.
So, how many of you know Erin Brockovich? How many of you know Thelma Louise? How many of you remember Hidden Figures? And what about Barbie?
Yep.
Yeah.
What did that do? What about Respect? Aretha, I Will Survive. How many of you have been dancing to that? Kind of, I will survive. And that one is just an iconic song for many different groups who run the world. We danced into that, and it's Raining Men. We all have our experiences with popular culture, and it is in us. So popular culture changes beliefs, behaviors, norms, raises awareness, which is basically the first part. And whether this is we spoke a lot about film and TV now, but it's also music, it's gaming. Why is it always gun, shoot each other games? Why is it not build up the world? Well, we have Minecraft. But why is it not Defenders of Planet Earth or the Cool Girls or, so it's gaming, it's sports. Global Goals World Cup has put the SDGs into the soccer field, particularly with women and all their rich diversity. But we also have a lot of sports, food, the popular culture at large. It shapes who we are, it shapes what we believe, and it can be used for good, and it can really be used for bad. Where we see the world today, it's at a tipping point. We have all the crises, we know them, climate, conflict. We also have the growing polarization, where popular culture is being used strategically. We've had genocide based on popular culture messaging, but we can also use it for good. And this is the time where I see, and we at the Museum for the United Nations, which unleashed the power, we work with popular culture platforms to really work for good and for all the issues. But it's a defining moment, because it's also these platforms, whether it is in these different streams of popular culture, this is a time where you step up, and you step up for good. Because else, one of the things we see in the world, and you mentioned it, Claire, we're seeing a declining empathy. We're seeing an empathy deficit. People are stopping to care because they don't understand because of the othering. And that is so dangerous, because when people stop to care, that's when war starts. That's when conflict starts. And when people stop feeling that they can and have agency, that's where apathy and indifference sets in, or aggression. So the declining empathy, declining agency, we can turn around both with popular culture, but also with having the dialogues that goes closer. So at the museum, or UN Live as we call it in popular, is we both work with the big popular culture platforms to go into the way they work. And we don't go into anything that doesn't reach at least 50 million people. Not only reach, but actually engage. And I could give a couple of examples if you want it. But we also work deep, because the empathy and the agencies comes from knowing and meeting. And it doesn't have to be a physical meeting like this. It can also be electronically. So we do big conversations, well, they're actually pretty intimate, in containers around the world that we hook up. And we learn from the Charter of the UN, We the Peoples, to try to create that global belonging, what we call a global we. And you can feed that further. So it's a beautiful loop. We learn from it that we can feed into popular culture, but popular culture also helps that feeling of belonging. Well, so let me just, and then I can get into a couple of the examples later if you want.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to note, one of the things that really was obvious to me living in America this summer was that women in particular were starved for entertainment and entertainment as events, right? So we saw people dressing up to go see Barbie, people going intergenerational. I saw Barbie with my mother. And she was like, I bought that for you for Christmas in 1984. Yes, you did. And the Taylor Swift tour, and then the Taylor Swift movie, and the Beyonce movie. And there were these incredibly very large, connective pop culture moments for women and girls this summer. However, I think one of the problems and one of the reasons we see so much sort of splintering and bifurcation is because monoculture isn't monoculture anymore. There was a time when however many hundreds of millions of people watched the series finale of MASH. Even the most popular American networks barely get above 1 million viewers a night in the traditional networks and the traditional ways that media were distributed. And now that's amazing that everyone has a chance to tell their story, right? Like, I watched a show, it's on Amazon Prime in the United States, called I'm a Virgo, that Boots Riley made, which was incredible. And my wife and I were sitting on the couch crying. We couldn't believe that this was a TV show that was on air, like that this actually happened. And that's magnificent. But do I think the people who could learn the most from I'm a Virgo are going to watch it? I don't think they are. So how do we, as creative people, as executives, as leaders, try and continue to spread what we believe to be an important representation when we don't have access to all the levers anymore, which is both good and bad.
And if I can jump in, sorry, this is your fault for getting media people on stage. We're never going, by the way, we're staying here, we're never going off. One of the problems is this used to be a shallow pond, where there were a few very big networks who would broadcast things to you, and yes, it was a shared experience, we all got it. We didn't really get to interact with it, there was no internet, but we did all get it, and we could talk about it, etc. And now what we have, and this is scary in many ways for a lot of people, is deep wells. And so you can go very, very deep in a very, very narrow space of content. And the really scary thing is if you're standing just a little bit next to it, you don't even know it's there. And this is how people like Andrew Tate can get so far before they even reach any sort of consciousness outside of that deep, deep well. And those deep wells have also done good. You have to remember, they also created communities, support, etc. But we, as leaders, as media leaders and others, we need to understand these wells, and we need to be prepared occasionally to dive into them and to empathize with whatever is going in it. And it's hard sometimes. but it's what Christy was saying earlier this morning. We can't ignore them and we can't be scared of them because that's the way communication happens.
And I was just
Our
going to
last
say
word.
very, very quickly to that. It also means we need to be ridiculously smart. Because,
we are.
And if I'm looking at this room and beyond, politicians, foundations, so the political power, the money power, the people power, the storytelling power, we need to be extremely smart because we are at a tipping point right now. And if the investments are not made and if people don't step up and also invest in something like this that might not have 1,000 proven results, we have enough to say, yes, this matters. Yes, this can really change hearts and minds and actions. But we need the investment because the other side invest in it
A lot. Okay, the blinking clock tells me that we have to end our conversation. But thank you all for this. It's been wonderful.